this thing, it automatically starts.
We are now recording live from San Jose, Costa Rica. Costa Rica? Is it Costa Rica or Costa? I think it's Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, that makes sense. True. I feel like it's one of those things where I called it Costa Rica for a long time, and I think it's because of word.
Yeah, now that we're here, we just
now we really understand the correct enunciation of these things as a local.
Yeah, exactly.
As a local. So yeah,
I think this is super cool. This is the second country.
Yep.
The second country of a global vagabond.
And we did our first podcast in another. So this is the third country that we recorded a podcast.
Yeah, we did the first podcast in Toronto.
Yep.
Back in Canada. Toronto.
Yeah, it's actually called Toronto. It's not Toronto. But anyway,
save
that for another conversation on another day, a day of never.
Yeah, let's leave it out. Yeah, that being said, we're here, Costa Rica. Just finished the last episode we did. We would have been in Isla Mujeres, back at Isla Mujeres, and then we hung out with Mark Meehan.
Yep. Sure did.
Right after that, which was super fun.
Yep.
Mark made the day trip from Playa del Carmen to Cancun and then took the ferry out to Isla Mujeres.
And as we mentioned, we were going to come to Costa Rica about a week earlier. And then we opted in for the island life for an extra week just to decompress prior to embarking on more exploration. And then, it was right at the goal line, right at the finish line. We were at the airport ready to jump on. We flew from Cancun to Mexico City, had a layover there. And then we got in line. We were all set, ready for Mexico City, going right, hand on my passport. And they're like, "Oh, where's your immigration form?" I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "You need an immigration form." Anyway, long story short is I didn't keep a form that I needed to keep from when we entered Mexico. So Jonathan embarked on the plane. I sprinted around trying to get it in time, but alas, there was not enough time. So I had to purchase a new immigration form. And then as I'm walking away from the terminal, realizing I don't know, and I don't have a credit card because I lost that. So I lost my credit card. I don't have an immigration form. I don't have a place to stay. And then I went to the customer support, and luckily they took my credit card information without the actual card. And I purchased a flight for the next morning. And then it all worked out. So I had a night in Mexico City to myself, and I stayed in this cool little hostel / hotel near like a kilometer or so away from the airport. And I ended up going for a nice day by myself. I got some tequila. I went and found an outdoor gym and worked out. I read all of Alice in Wonderland. And then I got up really early, drank a bunch of coffee, and then made my way back to the airport, where I successfully made it onto the flight. And then I got over here to Costa Rica. And then
I was hoping they were going to detain you.
Yeah.
They were going to detain you again for another go.
Yeah, we get one extra
like, what else could you fuck up this time?
Yeah.
That would keep you from coming. But here you are, man. You made it. Yeah, you said you ended up in like Guatemala or something, and you're like, holy shit, how did I get here?
Yeah, so I got the flight to Costa Rica for 8 a.m. Yesterday, and I show up. I get through the bag check, and I'm sitting in the terminal. I'm go to look at the screen to see what my gate number is. And then I look at my flight number and I look at the screen and it says Guatemala. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me right now. You gotta be fucking kidding me. But luckily I actually left the airport, went back to the customer support, and they assured me that I just had to stay on that flight and there'd be a quick layover in Guatemala, which I did. So technically I went to 3 countries in one day.
Jeez,
3 countries in one day. It's like whatever. Yeah, it's like not a really big deal per se.
Cool.
And then
that's your LinkedIn bio.
Yeah, but it does remind me of Epictetus, where, obviously I'm not the most best planner. Sometimes I, let a couple things slip, but alas, so is the price of peace of mind sometimes, which is a good diluted way of, not having everything together, but it all worked out.
Yeah.
We're now in Costa Rica.
Yeah, no, I was going to say from that type of an experience, there's all sorts of lessons that can be learned. And I love that immediately it was like, okay, well, I'm going to spin this. You used the word alchemy. I'm going to spin this and turn a negative experience into a positive experience, which I really like that. I like how you just said, I'm going to have a fun day to myself. I'm going to do all the things that I love. I'm going to read and hang out and work out and just make the most of it. And I think I can appreciate that a lot. And don't lose the other.
It's
lessons.
an and instead of but.
Don't
right?
lose the other lessons that are available, right? And you know, my bad. I should have had, you know, some of the details sorted out around, you know, when I looked at the Can I Travel website, knowing the immigration form, that wasn't one of the things. Like when we came into Costa Rica, they didn't give us any forms, so it's just maybe it's a Mexico thing.
It was just a Mexico thing. They took the immigration form as they got into the flight, and then they don't give it back. Yeah. So it was just to get out of the country, which is just a way for Mexico to make a little cash.
Yeah, I think I was messaging James Winters because I was posting on Instagram about the airport fiasco with Iain. He's like, what happened? And then he mentioned that the reason they do that is to track smuggling into the country. And
they're on us.
Very common in the U.S. to Mexico as a transit route. Yep. Yeah, man. So I'm glad you made it. You're here.
Before we get, because there was lessons, but I remember as I'm walking away, and it hit me over the head that like I have no plan. What I'm in this random state, you got nothing,
whatever.
And then I was like, I was very proud of myself because adversity doesn't make the man; it reveals him to himself. And very quickly, it went from like the visceral reaction of like, fuck, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is chaos. It's going to be more money and time. I don't know how I'm going to do this, yada, yada. And then very, very, very quickly, like within the span of 10 seconds, it went from like fucking stress and anger to just peace and just accepting it and be like, all right, well, this is what I have to do next. It reminds me a lot of Herman Hesse from his book, Siddhartha, where he talked about
such a great book.
And Herman Hesse, one of the most biggest inspirations.
This is your spirit animal.
He is Herman Hesse, along with Alan Watts. He's my spirit animal, dude. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But one of the things it talked about is it talked about being like a rock falling through water, and you just go to the next available thing, because that's the way the gravity works, the rock falling through the water. So it's like I tried to get on the flight, it didn't, and now on to the next thing, and then just literally no pause, just on to the next. You just continue onto the path, even though the path wasn't the exact route that you had foreseen or would have liked it to be.
Mm. If you don't mind backpedaling a minute, I thought it was really fun hanging out with Mark.
Absolutely.
That was cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, man.
Mark came to Isla Mujeres right before we left for Costa Rica, and we got baked.
We smoked a lot of weed.
What was the text message he sent you? Is I'm gonna bring
bring enough weed for a prison sentence. And it was a lot of fun.
Such a good time.
We even recorded like an hour 75-minute podcast, but it's not even postable for a number of reasons.
Totally.
And it just made no sense from an outside perspective, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And I was like which is funny because that was about the fifth time where we were like, it's the last time we're going to see you now, Mark. Because when we were in Mexico and he was going to go back to Toronto, and then he decided to extend his stay. And then we had a couple different situations like that where when we thought it was going to be the last night together, and then there's just more and more and more.
That's a great illusion.
Yeah, it's like a great illusion.
This something that I learned from doing the men's weekend in 2018, where they have a send-off where you gather around and you get excited and celebrate the fact that you made a fucking decision and that you're going to go do something really cool. And then everyone gets together, gets excited and fires you up, tries to help you set the context for when you go, the way to look at it for when you go. And we've got all this talk about whenever we come around, Mark, he's got ceremonial magic that he kind of dusts and infuses into our circle and our space. And that's always fun.
Yeah. Ceremonial magic. It's really just kind of imbuing a certain process with meaning. So ceremonial magic, for example, like at a wedding, have everyone dress up and be on the different sides of the aisle, and then the music and then the walking down the aisle. It's just a way of it's also a certain way of like creating positive intentions mixed with self-fulfilling prophecy, mixed with trying to cultivate almost a collective effervescence, which is something we talked about before, kind of getting everyone on the same state of consciousness or vibration, whatever the hell you want to call it.
The thing I like about the way Mark does it is when we do this He calls it
Curating.
Yeah, curating the experience. Ceremonial magic is I feel like every voice in the table gets heard, which is something that I really like about his presence and bringing that forward is he says, okay, what's the intention you want to bring? And he just totally backs off and he waits till you're done. And then that, like you said, that meaning gets infused into the experience. That meaning gets infused into the space, and everybody's ceremonial magic creates this cool smorgasbord of intent. And we have fun times with that. Yeah, super fun. Yeah, we've got baked, so that's always a good time.
Super baked.
The thing I love, the thing I took away, I take a lot of stuff away from hanging out with some of your good pals, but Mark specifically, just like he has no problem turning the camera on because he has this like creative directive sense where he wants to capture moments and experiences, and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable with having the camera on. Yeah. And it reminds me of just like Gary Vee style, where Gary Vaynerchuk will do like the daily V, and he'll have like a videographer documenting his entire day. And that was really cool because rather than trying to like set up the camera, have a script ready, and then like create something innovative or tell some specific story that you had intention of telling, is you just allow the experience to play out. Yeah. And then maybe you capture 2 minutes or 3 minutes that are interesting. And Mark captured a bunch of like 15-second clips that were really creative. And I like to see, it was cool to have a different dynamic involved for an entire weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of in general makes me think about, I think it just being an artist in general. And we read The Denial of Death last year by Ernest Becker. And he talked a lot about how an artist is someone who rejects the conventional sense of reality and then successfully creates some sort of interpretation of that world to justify it. And I think I've even seen it in myself, taking videos or writing things at certain time where there's almost unendurable insufferableness of the way in which the current the way life is happening. Not even like, and when I say insufferable, not from a negative pain perspective, although it can be that, but more just a dullness. Like it's so dull, so mundane that we have to now imbue it with some sort of extra significance and capture it and put a filter on it and do all those kind of things to almost justify the moment, because the moment isn't good enough on its own. And I think there's like a balance where I've seen in myself where you need to, because there's a lot of value in that and in certain situations, and alchemizing negative experiences and building off of certain things. But I even see it within myself where, sometimes I'll post an Instagram story, not because there's anything in particular that I wanted to say, but manufacturing that so as to get the validation. It's something we've talked about before, where seeing the people viewing your Instagram story and it's just a reminder that, oh, I exist. And there's almost, I think it's a remedy in a way for a certain discontent that underlies a lot of the more quote unquote mundane things about life. What do you think about that?
How does that connect the denial of death?
The denial of death, he talks about how the artist is someone who rejects how things are and like just as it is, and then imbues and creates like a filter and interpretation to kind of elevate the moment into a certain way.
Because I got your first point, because one of the things I remember about denial of death is the difference between artists and people that are seen as like neurosis or like
to build on that, the only difference between, and I even read The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley before we left Mexico, which is his experiences with psychedelics, specifically mescaline. And it talked about the exact same vein as Ernest Becker, where the difference between the neurotic and the artist is really only a matter of functionability and actually successful enrollment or successful, it's creating an interpretation of reality that other people can get enrolled in and relate to and like or enjoy or appreciate. Whereas the neurotic person, who's suffering from neurosis or psychosis is basically has that story, that different interpretation, but it's so wacky, unsuccessful that no one else can get behind it.
Communicate it to other people,
yeah,
where they can accept that as okay.
Yeah,
that's art, because everything's abstract.
Yeah, like Seneca at the end of on the shortness of life, life is long if you know how to use it. He talked about some poet from like fucking ancient times saying, "He who knocks." A stable mind who knocks on the door of poetry is unanswered, or something like that. And there really is that fine line between the neurosis and the creativity. So
yeah, not to compare marketing into
no, and if anything, I was relating it more to myself. It's
successfully just, to how artists do it.
Yeah,
which is something that I admire a lot. The other thing that I took away from that entire weekend experience where we were with him, and then when we left, we ended up being in Cancun for a couple extra nights. We may or may not have ingested more psychedelics.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know.
May or may not have. This is in theory.
The intention for January for me anyway was to microdose psychedelics. May or may not have been to microdose psychedelics. And one of the things that I didn't foresee was going to a different country and how that would impact that, and not taking it with me, which makes sense because I wouldn't want to bring it across the border, which I didn't. And so left it back in Mexico. But through that entire experience of being with Mark, getting baked, having fun with you guys, and then going to Cancun again for a couple extra nights where we ingested more psychedelics.
Man, that was like such a wild card X Factor trip.
Like 48 hours of just like sitting in meditation and just like vibing to music.
Because I think we had like a drink and went to this burger place that was nice in Mexico. I guess it was a chain because it was in Playa del Carmen and Cancun, and then we smoked a bunch of weed before and after. and then that was that first night at that Airbnb, and then the next day
we can't take it with us.
Yeah, so we might as well take it. So we took about half a tab of lysergic acid diethylamide in theory, and we just fucking chilled all day. Yeah. And doing like together, but then separate. Like we're both just chilling in the same room. I'm reading Aldous Huxley's Doors to Perception. You're drawing.
I was drawing a painting.
The paintings in that room.
That was really cool. Really cool paintings. And like the biggest takeaway that I had from that entire experience for me, and again, the accumulation of hanging out with Mark and wrapping that whole experience together, was just the importance of, for me, slowing down. And it's something that I've worked towards slowly. I've mentioned on the podcast before, doing the Happy Body program, where he talks about the science of exercise, nutrition, and relaxation. And so I've been incorporating relaxation into my routine, and then plugging in the X factor. I've been listening to a lot of Joe Dispenza, which is something that Gabriel recommended to me, and a couple other friends recommended to me. There's a cool program that's Netflix-like. It's called Gaia. And I know you and Mohsen were watching some Gaia when Mohsen was here in Mexico, Alan Watts, and Ram Dass, things like that. And I've been just watching some of Joe Dispenza's work, and it's all based off of the difference between essentially being in like a stress response, fight and flight, and then transitioning your nervous system to relaxation and this rest and digest nervous system. And a lot of the problems that I'm experiencing with my body, slowing down is really important. Feeling my muscles is really important, but also just knowing that I can't create anything unique. I can't create anything that's going to benefit the world if I'm coming from a place of lack, if I'm coming from a place of scarcity, or if I'm coming from a place of stress. And so instead, doing the things that we've talked about, like meditation in the morning, and like using that as kind of a pillar, where we start with relaxation, we start with intention, we start with, this equanimity, this poise, this tranquility. And then from there, we get to create. Yeah. Because Joe talked a lot about how most people have dozens of thousands of thoughts a day, all being virtually the same ones that they had the day before. So you create your personality based off your thoughts. And then we literally just live our life based off our conditioned past. Yep. Or we live our life based off this predictable future. And we're always in one or the other. which is the known. And if you live in the known, then things don't change. You just literally keep living the same day
the
or
same
life or thoughts over and over and over again.
Cyclical.
And so, that experience, the psychedelics, all of these influences we've been having, listening to you talk about poetry and meditation and Joe, and it all come together this moment where I was sitting there and I was doing this exercise for my glute where I was in this, it's called a 90-90 position where my legs are in this 90-90 position. And I was working my glute and I was telling you.
Psychedelics helped engage your muscles, bro. What the heck?
Helped my glutes activate. And I was sitting there and I was like literally like in awe. I was like, I haven't felt these tiny muscles in my glute activate for months. And I was saying to Gabriel, like, I think I need to slow down more. Because even when I do happy body, I'm doing movements where I'm kind of just like checking the box. Like I did it.
Going through the motions.
And I don't think I'm going to get much better. And I don't think I'm going to improve very much if I keep doing it that way. So anyway, a huge takeaway for me was just to slow down, spend more time in relaxation, spend more time in rest and digest. And then from there, I get to create.
Yeah. It's not.
From there, I get to make decisions.
It's like to that point, it's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah. It's not more is better. It's better is better.
Yeah. Because you could do the same thing over and over again, and it's not improving, and you're just that's such like an identification with a concept where it's like I'm doing it, and when you do it, this is what happens, and then it's almost like it's collapsing the idea of something with the thing itself, where because we get so caught up in words and symbols, and in your case, doing these exercises. In the mind, it tricks you into, because the default mode is like as easy as possible, less work, all those kind of things. The mental default is like, well, success is doing these things. And then it's not doing the things, it's feeling as though that the concept of doing the things happened, as opposed to doing them.
Sure. Yeah, it's even to take it to like a very practical application in your life is Jim Rohn talks about the difference between people who are task oriented and very busy, and they are workaholics and they're trying to work 12 hours, 14 hours a day. They'll take 2 jobs versus people who are focused on being productive and producing results. And so I'm like checking these boxes of like, I'm doing the exercises, but like, if I'm really honest with myself, it doesn't feel good. A lot of times I'm working through pain, and over the course of months, I'm not seeing improvement. The improvement that I want to see. And so should I do the exercises? Yeah, I should do the exercises, but I need to find a groove inside of slowing down where I'm actually feeling the muscles the way that'll put me in a position where 2 weeks from now, I'll have made progress. And a month from now, I'll make progress. And part of that comes down to like hiring a coach and investing money in things that I care about. And I'm happy to talk about that on the show, but the big appreciating for sure. But one of the big takeaways from hanging out with Mark and that psychedelic weekend.
That's an interesting. I mean, we didn't do. Oh, I guess we did. He didn't. But that's an interesting mastermind dynamic because, like,
the three of us, plus
it's not
Joe Dispenza,
plus Joe Dispenza, Alan Watts,
all these guys.
There's so much.
Seneca, all of it.
Yeah,
it's always great to have one of the best life hacks that I've found. You may be able to use if you're open to it. Is finding friends that like to read a lot, or finding friends that love to solve specific problems, and then give them the problems to solve and give them the books to read. Like one of the things I like to do with Gabriel is give him good books, because like he will literally decipher it and he'll bring it down, and then he'll only share the best stuff with me, which is what I like.
What a perfect time to bring up the fact that I talked about sending me the link, the password for your Gaia account, which you shut down because there was money involved.
That's not why. That's not why.
What is it?
It's not about money.
Oh. Well, I first off, I said I'd pay, but I'm just saying, think about what you just. Send me the money. I'm just saying, think about what you just said. Imagine how much I'd watch it and then me synthesizing it.
I get that. Yeah. Don't worry, we'll get there, bro. We'll get there.
Yeah, I gotta standardize before I optimize. I'll start with a book before I get to recurring.
I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the things I wrote down is fun to talk about is you sent me was it over Facebook? No, it was on Instagram. It was like just a James Clear post about like just starting.
Yeah.
And then worrying about
standardize before you optimize.
you know, changing the variables of how it's going to work. And there's a concept called standardize before you optimize.
AKA this microphone is in a cup.
And it's been in a cup since we started, so we haven't been optimizing, but it still works. It's doing its job.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've learned from James. I know you read Atomic Habits. I know you got a lot from that book. And so again, like just having people around you that are focused on personal development, that want to get better. When your environment gets better, you get better. Can you just, because like so many times you've reminded me to just start or just to standardize. And it's been super helpful for me. Anything specific you've gotten from him?
Get paint on the canvas before you start trying to make a fucking Da Vinci, like Sistine Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like imagine before you'd ever dribble the ball, you're like, I'm going to be like LeBron James. And you're like, let me go for it. Like it just doesn't make any fucking sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. So it takes a long time to really get a habit in place. And if you set the goal too high, then when your body goes back to default, then it's something that's not possible. So the best way I like to give the example for standardize before you optimize, from my personal experience, is meditation. And I started off.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it helped me a lot. And once you hear it, it makes like visceral resonating sense. So most people, they try and they're like, they hear the glory of meditation and they see the infographic of the businessman. He's like, I meditate 8 minutes a day so I can take over the world. And then there's a guru that says, if you meditated an hour, you wouldn't have to. And it's this whole dynamic there. And you're like, okay, well, I hear meditation is the secret code. So let me start meditating an hour a day.
It might be, by the way.
And it may be, by the way, but that's another point for another conjecture. Anyway, so let's say you don't really meditate and you're like, I'm going to meditate for an hour, or let's say 30 minutes a day. I'm going to meditate 30 minutes a day. You don't meditate yet. And then you set out and you're fucking excited. I'm going to freaking master my mind and consciousness. And a couple days go through and you did your 30 minutes. And then one day you didn't get the best sleep and you're tired and you're like, well, 30 minutes, I can skip it for a day. And then the next day comes and you're like, fuck it. I don't really need to do it. I'm tired again. And then you don't do it because the goal is too high. James talks about making the goal, the new habit that you want to start, so easy that you can't fail. And after multiple iterations of trying to do 10 plus minutes of meditation per day, I listened to his book at the start of 2020, and he explained the concept of standardize before you optimize. And I was like, and he said, make it so easy that it's impossible to fail. And so what I did is I said 5 breaths when I wake up and 5 breaths before I go to bed, lying on my back.
That was like early 2020?
Early 2020. And then five breaths. And then eventually got to 10 breaths. And then it got to a minute. And then I did 5 minutes. And then with the help of old Jonathan Andrews here in the Circle program, I made a commitment to do 10 minutes, which was enabled through that. And also setting it up where it made sense to do that. And then I did that. And then I did 10 minutes. And then I switched to 15 minutes. And now I'm up to 20 minutes. And then I have it, like I usually do at least 20 minutes. And then sometimes I do more. So if there's a habit that you want to create, break it down where it's so easy that you can't fail. Because the goal of the success of why you would do meditation or another habit, for example, you're not going to see in the first couple days really, like from a big scale anyway. Yeah. So it's not about how much value you get in the terms of meditation. It's not about how much value you get out of 5 breaths per day. The value of the 5 breaths is getting the paint on the canvas and starting the habit so that you can work up to an amount that's sustainable and then see the results in the longer term.
And you will get value from the 5 breaths.
And you will get value from the 5 breaths.
Yeah, really great, man. And I think another point worth making is not being too hard on yourself when you miss a day. Because I remember, I think Johnny Lowe, when we did the Circle Up, Iain mentioned that he committed to 10 minutes a day of meditation. In Circle Up, we gave men an opportunity to make a commitment on a daily discipline that they wanted to implement in their lives. And Johnny chose like push-ups or handstand push-ups or something of that nature. And he was the only man that did the actual 60 days. But what did you do? Like 50 days, 55 days, like something like that?
Yeah. Something like, what was it? Something like that.
2 months.
2 months.
And like, but you miss a day and it's like, it doesn't make it the end of the world.
And that's one of the ones
it's not a positive habit.
Don't miss twice, which is a good thing where it just, you miss a day, you have the compassion. All right, well, I missed a day. I guess it's all off. And that's where it's like setting this idea of every day as opposed to the actual tangible benefit of what you're doing. Are you attached to a streak, or do you want to do something that's beneficial for you?
Yeah, it reminds me of hearing, I never watched the show, but what's that comedian's name?
Give me some more context.
Seinfeld? Yeah.
Jerry
Seinfeld. I never watched the show, but
what's that comedian on Seinfeld?
Yeah, it's like one of the things that I heard about the reason why he became such a successful comic is because he wrote a joke every day. That was his intention, was I will write one joke every day. Yeah. And knowing someone closer, our friend Abdu, when he was doing his stand-up sets, he was writing almost every single day. And if you start with one joke, then the chances are that you might sit there for another couple of minutes and try to get another one. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But Jerry's point was he had a giant whiteboard and it had the days of the week and it had the month outlined, and he was creating a streak. And he said, make as long of a streak as you can. And but if you break the chain, that's okay. Just don't miss twice.
Yeah. I think actually when it comes to daily disciplines, having a low threshold is, until you get to a certain point, you can work up to it. Having a lower threshold is better, because I think what you hit on there is if you set the bar low, 5 breaths or one joke a day, then once you get started, it's usually just the prospect of what you have to do that you need to get over. And then once you've started, the inertia is already in the direction. The pen's in your hand, the words are on the piece of paper. Yeah. It makes logical sense, if it makes sense to you, to just keep writing. Yeah. But it's the getting started that's difficult.
I agree, because I've been working on the Circle Up book for 7-8 months now, and the hardest part is sitting down, finding the time, carving the time out to sit down. But when I sit down, when I get 10-15 minutes into writing, you do get into a flow state where it's like, okay, this is making sense, and I stop checking the time, but it's getting myself to sit.
Yeah, if you just said, I'll do one paragraph a day, like it's when I have to write 10 pages a day because I read that Stephen King does 50 pages a day for decades. I guess I have to start there. But that's not meeting where you're at. Yeah. You need do it so it's like there's no way you couldn't. His whole thing is James Clear, is you want it to be easy. You don't want it to be this like tough battle. You want to work with the inertia, work with your default mode network, which is lazy and doesn't want to do things. And you just make it so easy that the prospect of fulfilling the discipline isn't difficult. And then this balances back out to what we were saying, where not just checking the box, where even if you make the box so small that you check, really try in that period of time too. Mm.
Yeah, that's Tim Ferriss, somebody that we both follow we follow his podcast. He has the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. We talked about him before on the show. When he says, when he's in book writing mode, his standardize for you optimize is 2 pages, which is about 750 words. Yeah. And when I started writing the Circle Up book, Tucker Max, who wrote the Scribe book writing method, he said 250 words, because like Tim Ferriss is he's a professional author and that's his career. And for me, I was doing all sorts of other stuff and I was writing, and so 250 words was a great place to start. And when I did that, man, it was just like so simple, man. Yeah. I just focused on 250 words. There was no pressure on myself. I'm just going to sit down and get some ideas down. And then all of a sudden I go 3, 4, 5 pages in, 5, 10 paragraphs in, and it just tends to snowball. And then you get to a point where it's like, even for me, when I was talking about it was really useful, this standardize for you optimize method, where I wasn't meditating before, but then I was doing Sam Harris's The Waking Up, app, and that was kind of my standardized, was just following a guided meditation. That was a really good place to start.
And yeah, I think the one you did really good was you started meditating, and you were listening to music because that was the way that got you started.
Yeah, it was just easy to wake up in the morning, throw my headphones on, and then listen to music that I really liked while I was breathing. And I was like, maybe I was meditating, maybe I wasn't, but I got in the habit of sitting down right when I woke up and being conscious about my breath. And then I was trying Sam Harris's stuff. And now I just I don't go a day because it doesn't make sense to go a day without meditating.
It's enjoyable. And what's interesting, so as to demonstrate not only my listening comprehension, but not my humility, to connect three things we've talked about so far: the meditation, Jerry Seinfeld, and Tim Ferriss. Jerry Seinfeld was recently on Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Really?
It was recently on Tim Ferriss's podcast, which Tim's getting the guests.
Yeah,
he's getting there.
He does.
And Jerry Seinfeld said the two things that are the most crucial to his just overall happiness for everyone. Obviously you can do the joke a day, and that's for a specific craft, but just general well-being. He said, along with lifting weights, meditation, transcendental.
Jerry said that?
Jerry said that, the two things, which something we've talked about before. Everyone we look up to and respect, almost all of them meditate.
Yeah. I remember when,
it's not a coincidence.
I remember when Tim Ferriss again, Tim was doing the research for Tools of Titans, which was such a smart book because he just interviewed some of the most famous, popular people, high performing people in the world, and then took what they said and the suggestions they made on the podcast and then turned it into a book. And he's got a big team of people that aggregated all of this great insight. And one of the major themes, the biggest theme from Tools of Titans, was that 80% of the high performers had some sort of meditation practice. Yeah. And it was obvious at that point that I was like, what am I fucking waiting for?
And the other 20% are just those people that have a fucking gene that they're super successful. Yeah. And you know what? They probably work out and get into a meditation.
Yeah, I was going to say,
you know what I mean?
They
do some sort of flow state activity that
working out
achieves the same
running or rowing or something like that.
Yeah,
it's very repetitive. Yeah. I remember even when I was listening to the podcast with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tim Ferriss, this was years ago. This was maybe 2017, 2016. And Arnold said he did the same technique. So Jerry Seinfeld said he did transcendental meditation. Did transcendental meditation for a year. And then he said after that he stopped, and for years afterwards he was getting the benefit that he experienced over the course of the year of the transcendental meditation.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it probably brings a certain level of presence to whatever activities, especially maybe a recurring one. And then tying back with I think the transcendental part is very important for meditation, but just even more meta and at large.
Oh no.
Because as I said, I was reading Aldous Huxley's Doors to Perception, his experiences from mescaline and psychedelic experiences. And it talked about the human desire and urge to transcend whether your personal bodily reality and to be more than what you think you are. And which is interesting because we've talked a lot about psychedelics. And I remember maybe 10 minutes ago, just in this conversation, I literally said something about psychedelics, and then I censored myself out from saying fuck, and I said heck instead, which I think in reflection shows that I think there's still a level of tabooness around psychedelics, but it's worth, I think, any and all risk to discuss it because I think it's that important. And then as a society, we've kind of shut down from rules and laws from the psychedelics in that space, but we've enhanced things ironically as we're drinking alcohol.
Yeah, it's like drugs and alcohol.
Which is saying drugs and alcohol is akin to saying pizza and food. And the thing about alcohol, although great and in the right context and not within too much of a surplus, because I'm saying this as we're drinking it.
Beer is massive.
It is more of a conscious, if there's a spectrum of unconsciousness to consciousness, wherever you are on it, oftentimes I think alcohol brings you more towards the pole of unconsciousness, whereas something like a psychedelic brings such great consciousness. And he talked about how for thousands of years, certain ancient tribes have used as a rite of passage, psychedelics. And he said, some of the first foreigner, like developed world from like early in the 1900s, he went and observed these practices with these tribes. And unlike alcohol, where someone who's very inebriated on alcohol, they lose all their motor functions and they're just less there. He was like, all these people were doing these dances and doing instruments, which is
getting rhythmic.
And getting rhythmic, and it's actually bringing greater consciousness, which 2019, Jonathan and I did ayahuasca, and we did it at this Brazilian Portuguese sect of Catholicism called Santo Daime in this church with guys and girls on each side.
Music,
and the elder, and that's my point around the music. The elders for hours were playing music and they didn't miss a goddamn note.
I couldn't believe it, man. They were so fired up. Oh man, what a good time. Yeah. I remember, while we're talking about it, the funniest part of that experience for me was, and I think we have plans to do ayahuasca soon. So I'm looking forward to that.
In a theoretical sense.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to head to Peru in the near future and check that out. But one of the funniest parts of that experience for me was the way they separated the ceremony was, it was exactly what Iain was saying, was about music, and we were reading these Portuguese hymns, Brazilian Portuguese hymns, and we were like, part of the process of making this collective effervescence, like you've described, and we're reading it, and I can read it fine. Like I'm used to Italian and French and things like that, so I was trying my best to go along with it. And we did the ceremony in 3 different dosages of the ayahuasca, and every time we did it, we would sing hymns and then we would meditate.
Yeah. So just to build out the context, so guys and girls on each side, everyone's dressed in white. The first thing we do is we drink the biggest portion of ayahuasca, and we all come back. The elders play music, and then, as Jonathan described, all of us had a book in front of us, which was like Catholic hymns in Portuguese, as we're all singing together, and then followed by 45 minutes or so of that, followed by then a 45-minute meditation in the dark, and then we did two more rounds of that, and then, as Jonathan's hinting at, it progressively got more and more psychedelic, if you will.
It was higher and higher.
Yeah.
And as I was getting higher, it was just, from the biggest takeaway from that experience is how you and I, this combination of just like seeking adventure together and being willing to be open-minded and being willing to try new things and being willing to explore consciousness and explore community. And the funniest part, and this is what I always remember about the experience, was, it's like we just took the 3rd serving. The guys are jamming,
and they're very serious about this. They're like a group, and they're
sweating.
They're very in earnest. Like they're taking this as a very, very serious practice.
And they do it like twice a month. So I don't know how they do that. But anyway, he was right. They took it very serious. They were by the books. They were reading these hymns, and it was in unison. And I was trying my best throughout the experience to read and follow along.
High as shit trying to read Portuguese.
And the third round, I was high as hell. And I'm reading it, and I look over at Gabriel. He's not reading. He's just like, he's just in the clouds somewhere. Who knows what's going on?
I was trying to read before that. It wasn't working, so I gave up.
So I'm reading it, and then all of a sudden, the actual words on the page lift off the page, and they start twisting and like moving around, and I'm like, man, I can't read this at all. And I look at Gabriel and I'm like, bro, I can't read it, dude. And he looks at me, he takes the book, he flips it upside down, he taps it, and he's like, same shit. And the book is upside down, and I'm looking at it, and I just can't help but laugh my ass off. And I explode.
We were like dying, man.
I exploded. And all these people from the other side, and we've got do you remember what his name was?
Bruce.
Bruce. We got Bruce, who's playing the guitar. Look over at me and say, what are you doing? And the main woman, who was definitely the one that was in charge, she looked over at me and she was like, had this like this, couldn't believe, just like
very, very upset.
Just like
us.
So pissed that
we were disrupting.
We were definitely disrupting. But I just couldn't help it. Just exploded in laughter. The thing was called Famazes or Famazes. That was the
everyone was chanting Famazes.
I'm like, bro, I can't read it, dude. He grabs it, flips it upside down.
Pause. Same
shit. And
Dude,
it just
oh my
hit
God.
so nice.
It
was perfect.
it was so spontaneous.
It was perfect.
It was just like a spontaneous.
It was like out of thin air.
it was like an ethereal presence.
So anyway, that was a hilarious experience, and I mean, after that, I went a little south, but we ended up getting home and it was fine. So thank you, Matt, for hooking us up with that ayahuasca experience.
We did get home.
We did get home,
but I was having quite the negative trip. So we were all in this church, and I threw up. Jonathan didn't throw up, and then I'm getting a little paranoid, and I'm like, I'm gonna be stuck in this forever. And I'm trying to read this book, and literally I can't even follow a thought, and it's just like I'm in this thought forever. And let me rewind on that night for a sec, because there's a certain portion of it that I thought was quite amazing. So at one point I went to the washroom, and I literally just went away to like try and get away. There was so much stimulus, so much noise with the singing. And I was sitting on the toilet, just sitting there. I just peed and I was just sitting there. And I looked at my phone, and it was, let's say it was 10 p.m. I looked at the clock, it was 10 p.m. And I'm like, all right, I'll put my phone away. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not gonna look at my phone for a while. And I start going down all these different rabbit holes of thought, like 15, 25, 30, 100, infinite realms of different rabbit holes of thought. And it felt like forever. And I was like, all right, maybe I should check my phone. I was like, no, I shouldn't check my phone. I should wait. And then I waited what again felt like forever. And then I look at my phone again, and it's 10 p.m. It's not even 10:01. Hilarious. It was still 10 p.m. So I was like, oh my fuck.
That's doom.
No.
Just doom on setting.
Doom on setting.
You're like fading into the distance. Like,
yeah. No. Anyway, I end up going to the sink. I don't want to throw up, but at some point I throw up, and then just like throwing up, and I'm like gasping and just like dry heaving. I go upstairs, I throw up more. People are everywhere throwing up. There's certain helpers helping out. Yeah. And eventually, most people had thrown up, and it seemed like it was over. And everyone's talking to each other, and it wasn't over for me. It wasn't over for me. And this guy comes. Yeah, Jonathan's a heavyweight for psychedelics. And we get into an Uber, and this ride home felt like eternity. And the way it played things in my head, because everything was happening in the moment, my brain was we had driven by certain landmarks, certain like checkpoints of the path home, and it recurred the same ones at different points over and over and over again. So it felt like I was going to be in this car ride forever. And it was cold. I think it was like March. And then I get out of the car first. Jonathan stayed back. He had our other friend who was organizing a different ride home there. So I get to our back porch, to our door. And I'm like, all right, I got to get in. I go to the door. I don't have the key, and it's locked. And I go to where we have the hidden key, and it's not there. And I literally didn't have a jacket, and I was cold outside, and I'm in this state of like forever. So I'm in this state of like cold and discomfort, and I'm like, this is never going to end. And it felt like that. And then eventually Jonathan came in, went downstairs, and then I'm in my bed, and I'm just checking what feels like eternity over and over again per minute, just forever. And then eventually it stopped. And then I was like, I started touching the walls and shit. And I was like, dancing. I was like, yes, let's go. And I was just so happy to return home.
Yeah. You were reading Plato and Socrates, and he was saying on the other side of pain is pleasure.
On God.
On God. I remember because, like, you know, it blows my mind that you decide to continue to have psychedelic experiences after the ones you've described to me.
It's called courage.
Because I've only had positive. I'm sure one day I'll have a bad trip. Knock on wood. But I just remember, I know when something's up when we're together, because like we were just like packing our bags, and I couldn't throw up. I tried to throw up, I wasn't throwing up, and I was like, all right, I'm basically ready to go. But I was gonna like mix and mingle and talk to people and say goodbye and thank them for the experience. You know, apologize to the lady for laughing in the middle of her ceremony. And I just remember you coming up to me, all right, bro, we gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of here. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. And I knew something was up. So I was like, okay, let me call an Uber. And I went to put my backpack on and put my shoes on before grabbing the Uber, which was a mistake. Because 2 minutes later, you came up to me, bro, we gotta get out of here. Is the Uber here yet? I was like, hold on, man, 1 second. So I finally called the Uber, and then it was just like that reoccurring over and over until we actually got into the car. And then the whole ride, I was like kind of peeking on my shoulders to make sure you're good. But yeah, I'm glad we made it home safe. Glad we had a good time. Overall, positive experience. I have a boomerang of us walking to the church where we were, like Ian said, we were in all white, and so we had these like white sweatpants that were fucking hilarious, and it's so funny how they looked so jokes. But overall, fun day, great day. The fact that, so one thing that's worth talking about, because we were watching, was it on Netflix? We were watching just like a documentary about LSD and
the psychedelics,
psychedelics,
strange trip or whatever,
and how to do it effectively and how to get the most out of it, how to be safe and set up the setting properly. One of the things you need to keep in mind is you definitely should never drive.
Never.
You should stay away from cars because it distorts your reality. And the other thing worth mentioning is you should definitely not have anything really important to do the next day. I remember we rolled into work, and everything I've heard about ayahuasca and different psychedelic experiences, we were very inexperienced at the time, but everything I've heard is about, creating space to kind of get,
the integration, reintegration.
That's the word, is the reintegration, where you can meditate on it, journal on it, don't do anything too strenuous. And we went right back to work the next day, which is
funny because the first time we did acid, and then the only times we did ayahuasca and DMT, we did it when we had work the next day.
Yeah.
So learn from our mistakes, clear out the next day.
Don't do that. And, just to kind of, I don't know if you have any other points you want to make on this ayahuasca trip, but just psychedelics in general, because I had a phone call right now because I've got a really cool opportunity in the mental health space, and I'm going to continue to make, room for myself to deliver keynotes, to deliver workshops about mental health, whether it's for young people or whether it's for men, for both, for businesses. And one of the things that came up was, what are you most excited for about the future of the mental health space? And the first thing that came to my mind was the efficacy of integrating psychedelics into the mental health research. And I know that it's not something that I can talk about on this call. It's just in terms of the brand that I'm representing and honoring the fact that they're giving me the opportunity, honoring the fact that they have expectations of the way that I'll approach it.
But in terms of talking to them, what was your number one goal for 2021?
To slow down.
Well, I thought the other one, honor the truth.
Oh yeah.
And I just think there's like,
well, I mean, but the truth, there's a spectrum.
Of course.
Right?
I just mean,
so I'm excited about a lot of things.
I just mean it's in terms of standardizing before you optimize. There was, if we started this podcast 2 years ago, we would not be talking.
It wouldn't have made
sense.
Not be talking. We would never have done this.
So we're standardizing before we optimize in terms of the conversation, because I think we got to a point where it's like the benefits of what we've seen with psychedelics is so great that if your brand, if your mission in life is to help you with mental health, to act like psychedelics are not part of the equation, which is why you've kind of moved this direction, would be just like not talking, and we're going to fight dehydration and not talk about water.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's room for figuring out a way of approaching it that's enrolling and that is palatable for folks that have never talked about it or experienced it, and likely have a very negative, connotation or a lot of taboo around the subject. So there's definitely a way to approach it, but there's also a lot of other things that I'm excited about that I could definitely talk about. But one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is because one of the things I am excited for is the research around the default mode network, and you brought that up earlier today. And it activates really heavily and it stimulates when people have anxiety. And anxiety, I remember you reading this book on love. What was it?
The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm.
Yeah.
And he talked about all anxiety stems from a feeling of separateness, of there's everything else and then you, with the illusion that they are not of the same, which goes to like an Alan Watts quote talking about how you did not arrive on this earth like a bird arriving on a branch, but you arrived like the branch growing. So in the same way, an apple tree apples, the earth peoples. So instead of thinking that you are something that comes into this world, you are rather something that comes out of this world.
Yeah, you grow out of it.
Yeah.
And with the default mode network, like you were saying, in terms of the art of loving, is this feeling of separation. And when people have anxiety, there's an intense feeling of separateness from other people.
Yeah.
And so some of the ways that manifests is in their body language. They don't make eye contact. They avoid physical contact. And again, back to Alan Watts, one of the things Alan talks about is your eyes is just a bridge to the universe, and your skin doesn't separate you from the world, but it's actually the bridge that connects you to the world. And so what's observed in the psychology research around the default mode network is it's activated and stimulated when people have anxiety. And one of the benefits, amongst many, of consuming psychedelics in the right set and setting, often observed, and now clinically, where you can do it guided with somebody that is experienced as a guide for psychedelics, is you find that their default mode network tends to quiet.
Yeah.
And it stops being so active and stimulated, and you start to feel this sense of connection. If anyone is in the space of researching or learning about psychedelics, one of the things that they often talk about is this afterglow.
Mm-hmm.
And how a couple episodes ago, Iain talked about Johns Hopkins and the research that they're doing. And one of the things that they found is these people who took one psychedelic experience, it was guided experience, where they had clinically, on the scale of depression, clinical depression, depressive symptoms that were clinically observed, reduced their symptoms to a normal level for up to 6 months.
Yeah.
Which is totally
even,
groundbreaking.
Up to 6 months, the majority of them were up to 6 months, but a lot of them even more.
So think about this afterglow,
yeah.
And it just makes so much sense. I mean, I'm not too deep of a conspiracy theorist, and I don't want to get too deep into it on this show, but when I was in high school and I experienced depression, one of the things that I was taking was Prozac. I was on antidepressants, and you take it every day,
mm-hmm.
and it's expensive. And you take it for Canada is not as bad because we have some health coverage, and but in the States you can just imagine how much of an arm and a leg people would be paying to help their kids out with these antidepressants. I'm not saying there's not ever a time and a place for this, but every single day, and it totally numbed me of any feeling at all. And I took it for years. And I remember on this podcast I talked about a coming of age for me as a man was in 2018 when I did my men's weekend. The thing that I admitted was that it was hand in hand with my very first psychedelic experience.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
In
mix.
May 2018, I did my very first psychedelic experience in a beautiful set and setting. It was a private hotel room with a friend who I really love and appreciate for guiding me through that experience. And then I did my men's weekend a couple weeks later, and it totally changed my life. And I just felt this sense of connection, and a sense of that I had choice, and a sense of I was responsible for my life, and I could make the decision that I wanted to make. And contrasting that to the pharmaceuticals, these people took one psychedelic trip, one guided trip.
Yeah.
And for months and months and months, that was the only thing they had to take, and it erased their symptoms.
And the reason why that is going back to what I was saying about Aldous Huxley around the transcendental experience. Also, you could call it a mystical experience, is that we get so stuck in our stories, and us getting stuck in our stories is probably somewhat in alignment with the default mode network. And we mistake our story and our interpretation of reality with reality itself. And what these compounds, these medicines, these drugs, psychedelics do is they help suppress the default mode network. They help collapse the stories that you're living in, and basically to eliminate temporarily your paradigms for the way in which the lens in which you see the world. And then, as we know, there's the old quote, when you change the way you look at the world you look at changes. And whether we want to admit it or not, we're wearing a lens. Like, I'm wearing glasses right now, and I can see clearly, and when I take them off, I can't. When I change it, it literally changes.
That guy had those pink glasses.
Yes,
put them on,
and it's pink.
Shit, totally different world out here.
But the thing the thing about the psychedelics is, if you're always wearing the pink glasses and you've never taken them off, you think the world is pink. And then when you take them off, you realize that isn't it. And
that goes back to Joe too, with living this conditioned past over and over and over again.
Yeah, Yeah. The break the habit of being yourself, and what Jonathan was saying before around we fall into these cyclical patterns of the same thing reoccurring. Like you can probably think about in your life where certain challenges that you've overcome, unless you've addressed the root issue of it, it's going to continue to manifest in your life in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think the power of the psychedelics is it allows you to take off the glasses, so to speak. And one of the ways I equate it to is if in regular day you're wearing a backpack and it has a whole bunch of weights in it, and you walk around, but you've always worn it. You don't even notice it. It's just there. And then when you take psychedelics, you get to take the backpack off and you feel light and it's different. And now the psychedelic experience will end, even though it seems like it might not, like it did for me a couple times. But eventually the psychedelic experience ends. And you have to put the backpack with the weights back on. And even though you still feel it, that it's there, you know that isn't the only reality that exists. And it broadens your horizons of what is possible. And that horizon broadening is the transcending the backpack, transcending yourself. And you realize that there's more there. And there's that sense of connection, which is the direct opposite of that sense of separation. Mm-hmm. And that sense of separation is the source of that anxiety and all the different ways in which that anxiety manifests. So, obviously it can be done in the wrong way, but I think
definitely it can be done.
Of course it can be done in the wrong way, but you know what? You can drink too much water and you can drown.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the first time I ever drank alcohol.
Yeah.
First time I ever drank alcohol, I think I was fed 12 shots of all different types of alcohol. And, I could have said that, alcohol is not for me, or I could have just realized that I abused it and didn't take it in an effective way because I was throwing up and vomiting. And
you hear about the person who does like a whole bunch of hits of acid the first time they ever do it. And they're like
20 hits. The other analogy, I'm not sure if this was also in How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah. Talking about the old sled.
Yeah. I was on a stage last year. Not 2020, it was 2019. I have to pee too. I was on a stage in 2019, and I had an opportunity to talk about an event and how it changed my life and the difference it made for me. And I kind of equated it without mentioning psychedelics, but I equated it to what the psychedelic experience can be like for people. So Gabriel mentioned breaking down paradigms and breaking down realities with the way you look at the world, the way you look at yourself. With psychedelics, imagine you're on a ski slope. If you like to snowboard, imagine you're snowboarding. And your life and this conditioned past is based off of your thoughts and your actions, and they develop into habits. And these habits, in the way your brain works, turns into these grooves, these networks of synapses that connect, and they occur in the exact same way. And so your life turns out to be you skiing down this slope in these exact same grooves over and over and over again. And they get deeper and deeper. And Jim Rohn, I was listening to Jim Rohn this morning he was talking about the bonds and the chains of habit. They become like these thick wires that you can't break. And so they're these deep grooves or these thick wires you can't break.
The chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they are too strong to be broken.
And then what ends up happening when you take the psychedelic experience, when you have the psychedelic experience, like Gabriel mentioned, is it removes these paradigms or taking off the glasses. It's like fresh powder falling onto the slope, filling in those grooves. And then you get to see the world in a new way, and you get to make decisions about how you're going to live your life.
You can literally go in a different direction.
You can literally go in a different direction. And so, this podcast, the purpose of this podcast is definitely not to, be a podcast about.
This is a psychedelic advocacy podcast. This is not a
psychedelic advocacy podcast.
It's not, but it's not just that.
However, I just you can't omit the benefits that you've experienced.
Yeah.
And, these are just anecdotal experiences from us, but there's research happening in the scientific community about the efficacy of these compounds. Friends and family we know have had their lives transformed and their lives changed. One of the best things that is happening with this research is people who are dying and have, terminal illness,
erasing death anxiety
and getting rid of their death anxiety. So just, again, that's not what the purpose of the podcast is, but we talked about ayahuasca, and it was worth mentioning and debriefing on some of these experiences.
Yeah. And I was going to say, so as to not belabor the point, But
let's beat a dead horse, motherfucker.
So as to belabor the point, we have so far when it comes to psychedelics, we have the analogy around the pink glasses. We have the analogy of the weighted backpack. Jonathan just mentioned the analogy of the sled down the snowy hill. And just so as to cap it off, I'll give one more analogy. And Tim Ferriss, who is a huge, obviously podcast person, huge person in the personal development and learning space, widely respected, is really one of the pioneers in terms of advocacy for psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy and research. And one of the things he equated psychedelics to is, think about, when you watch one of those medieval times movies and there's a blacksmith and they take a sword and they put it in that fire and that piece of metal, and then they take it out and then they hammer it, right? So the way your brain is, your personal reality, your personality, who you are, who you think you are, is that regular piece of metal, and it's very sturdy and hard. What psychedelics allow you to do is it allows to take that base and it puts it into that fire where it turns all red. And then you can take a hammer and you can shape it into something else, getting out of the fixed mode, the conditioning, the paradigms, the indoctrination of what you are, or rather what you think you are. And then so as to provide the somewhat balanced opinion on this, obviously we're not completely objective and we're quite biased in favor of, but as Tim Ferriss says, it can be when that metal of who you are with the psychedelic state is now more malleable and can be shaped, it can be shaped in the wrong way. And you can have bad experiences. And that's where the set and setting has becomes important, because it can throw you off and you can change something in maybe a way that it isn't beneficiary to your goals. So I think not only the advocacy for psychedelics is important, but really caveating that by saying the proper use of psychedelics, not to just
willy-nilly.
Yeah, don't just take them and be like, I'm gonna get fucked up, because you will.
You probably get fucked up.
you probably will.
What time's your call?
6 minutes. So
okay. Yeah, just one last idea I wanted to share.
Share it out.
Is around the law of sowing and reaping.
Yes.
And it seems to be totally disconnected from most things we talked about today. But I think going back to some of the things we talked about with James Clear and standardize before you optimize, getting started, taking on new disciplines, taking on new habits, is Ian and I both listen to the same audio. It's called like the all-encompassing Jim Rohn guide on Audible. It's like another 10-hour
complete
audio,
library.
The complete library, like 10 hours of audio of Jim Rohn. And he shares two ideas back to back. One is the law of sowing and reaping, and the other one is discipline. And he talks about how every discipline action has multiple rewards, and then he ties it back to the law of sowing and reaping, where they're interconnected. And he says that when you have discipline in your life, it's just the way things are. It's just the way the setup is that if you take discipline action, if you do what we talked about with James, where you put paint on the canvas and you start and you develop these habits, whether it's meditation or joke writing or whatever it is that you're excited about, the rewards get multiplied. Like you sow the seed, but you always reap more than you sow.
His biggest thing on that is, to that point, is you get more than what you put into it. He says for every dollar that you put into your personal development, it'll come back tenfold. And Jim Rohn, who Jonathan introduced me to back in 2014, I heard that and I thought it was bullshit. Now, I thought, you invest something, you're going to get something back, or probably more than what you put in. But I didn't think it'd be tenfold. And not only in my life, and we can relate to this, not only is what you put into it tenfold, it is beyond the point where it's not even, where the abundance of what you're living in is beyond needing to quantify it to what you put in, because it enables you to pretty much do what you want.
And it ties back into a lot of the conversations.
You saying everything's interconnected?
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversation on this podcast about busting loose from the money game when Wilson was here in Mexico, and we were jiving on those ideas, where in that book he talks about every dollar you spend recycles and creates more money. And to that point of investing in yourself and personal development, I was having a conversation last night over text about a guy who was, trying to pursue a woman. And I said, don't focus on that. I said, the having, so the outcome that he wanted, which was attracting this girl, will always come if you focus on becoming more. Mm-hmm. The becoming more, the investing in yourself, Jim puts it, you can always have more because you can become more.
Yep.
And that's the challenge.
That's the challenge.
And so I just said, he's got the totally wrong focus. Instead of the having, to focus on the becoming. And when you focus on the becoming, that's when these disciplines really kick in. That's when taking action really kicks in. That's when you start living the life of your dreams, which we are out here doing in, is it Costa Rica or Costa Rica? Out in Costa Rica. And just to kind of, I'm happy to share more about law of sowing and reaping. And I know Gabriel's got a lot to share on this as well. It ties into the law of averages. We are going to be taking about a week.
Oh yeah. In terms of having having like a last night, we're going to do that and split up for a week because we fucking hate each other.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
No.
How do I put myself through this?
I'm sure we're going to go to dinner or something.
Yeah, no, we definitely will.
Yeah, we'll
meet up. We're in San Jose, so it's small.
Yeah, we just thought it'd make sense to have a little break. Makes sense.
Yeah, one of my favorite personal development mentors said the biggest thing missing in relationships, the biggest thing missing in marriages is that they don't miss each other anymore because of quarantine. They're spending all their time together. And so, we've been literally attached to the hip, almost spending
every day together
75, almost nine weeks or something like that.
And not to mention all of quarantine. Literally every day of quarantine plus the 30 days at West.
So in the past where I could just go back to my parents' house and we'd hang out, we'd be at par for 4 or 5 a day, we've been literally together and touched it.
Yeah, we need to remember how awesome each other are.
It is, yeah.
And that's what we had when we did the LSD the other day. We were like, man, we need the time apart just to remember, maybe, theoretically. Just to remember, like, oh yeah, because you get used to it and you take it for granted. And then we're like, oh, there's a reason why we spend this much time together. But when you spend all your time together, you forget why that is.
For sure. So we need a little forgettery.
Before we get back to the memory.
Yeah. So we will, Do you want to do like an individual podcast and then we'll both post those and then we'll post the podcast together? Anyway, we'll figure out the details.
We'll figure out all the details. Anyway.
Thanks for tuning in.
From Costa Rica with love. From Costa Rica with love. Peace.